Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Positive Psychology Hour. Today, we're going to be talking about strategies to cope with transitions and reemergence anxiety. This is part one of a three-part series with the Whole Being Institute, our partner in the Positive Psychology Hour. Change is scary, and we've had our share of it in the last 18 months. Now, as we're slowly emerging from COVID-19 restrictions, we're still grappling with anxiety about what might be, sadness about loss, and fear of being stuck in an uncertainty. So we've joined together with the Whole Being Institute for a special 3-day series on managing reemergent anxiety and handling transitions, whether it's the back and forth directions about COVID, whether to wear a mask or not wear a mask, whether to go outside or not, or whether to travel or not, or the more traditional moments of major life change that have happened to many of us: divorce, job transitions, retirement, illness, and many others. This series is designed to help us learn to embrace these challenges as doorways to shape a better today and a better tomorrow. Today is part one, and we're going to discuss how we can move from the fear of "I have no idea what to do next" to a stable ground of deliberate living that will move us towards enduring happiness. And tomorrow, we will be discussing how to write a new story of who we are and who we might become because of this journey through uncertainty. And then finally, on Thursday, we're going to learn how to use Whole Beings Spire to help us during times of upheaval. Megan McDonough is with us today to start our series, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's very familiar to our audience, but to some of you who are joining us for the first time, you might not know her yet. She's the co-founder of the Whole Being Institute and the CEO. And the Whole Being Institute is an educational organization that teaches the science of human flourishing. She has a degree in nuclear medicine, decades of leadership experience, and 25 years of teaching and practicing yoga. She combines intellectual understanding with an embodied approach to teaching and leading. And she likes to focus on how to get from point A to point B through whole person engagement. She's an award-winning writer and the author of 4 books on mindfulness. And her work focuses on helping people and organizations thrive. I also want to mention that this series is co-sponsored at the JCC by the Lambert Center for the Arts and Ideas, McCall Meditation Mindfulness, and Jewish Spirituality, the Center for Jewish Living. Welcome to the call, my dear friend, Megan McDonough.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Caroline. I really appreciate not only you, the organization that the JCC holds, and I appreciate each one of you because we've been through a lot together these last 13 months. And in fact, Caroline, when you were doing the introductions, I thought you were going to say 18 years because in some respects it feels like 18 years. So I want to actually invite us to come together as community the way that we always do. And that is with a sense of centering and coming together. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I invite you to put your stuff to the side, to get comfortable in your chair. And if you want to, you can close your eyes, you can take a soft gaze, or you can continue to look at the computer screen. There's no secret sauce here other than just being present. And I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and a big exhale. And actually let that exhale be long and deep and complete, as if you're sighing away every moment before this one. Another deep breath in. Big exhale. And as you exhale, take your attention inward and just noticing what's happening in the ecosystem of you. So mentally take your attention down to your toes so that you say hello to your feet and your ankles, greeting your shins and calf and knees. Hello, thighs and hips. Notice the whole length of the spine right up to the crown of the head. Aware of the facial expression. Noticing the relationship between your shoulders and your ears. And let your attention roll down the length of both arms, filling the sleeves of your arms with your attention right down into your fingertips. Hello, arms. Hello, torso. Hello, head and legs. And as you notice what's happening now, connecting with your felt sense of being embodied, just ask yourself the following question. What's shifting or changing for you now? What circumstances, what situations, what relationships are changing and shifting and in transition? Just noticing that. Taking a deep breath in. Big exhale. And as you release that exhale, open your eyes if they're closed and take a moment to look at who else is joining us in community. So I usually take some time and just really look at our little Zoom icons so I can look at who's in the room together. Mentally sending each person a little smile, a little hello, hello to new people and to people I know, some people waving. Hello, hello. Really good to see you all. So I invited that question, what's changing and shifting in your life? And I want to bring you back to 1999. Yes, it was a long time ago. Time travels really quickly. And you'll recall at 1999, the news was predicting that the computers were going to crash all over the world. Do you remember that? Something catastrophic was going to happen when the computers went from 1999 to 2000. It turns out the world didn't crash on January 1st, 2000. But in 1999, I did sort of have a personal crash in my professional life. And I remember specifically when the ground I was standing on shifted for me, that sense of uncertainty. At the time, I worked in the field of nuclear medicine, what I went to school for. And it was springtime. I remember it vividly because I worked on a beautiful campus. And in springtime, it was particularly so. I mean, we had these beautiful cherry blossoms and we had the lime green grass and the blue skies, beautifully manicured. But I happened to be inside in a meeting. So I could not see the beauty outside, even though it was right behind me. I was in the executive conference room and I was seated around a smooth mahogany table in my very plush executive chair. And we were surrounded by the senior leadership of this organization. And I remember, even though I couldn't see the beauty outside, that my whole focus was on a pad of paper in front of me where I scratched the following words. And those words were, "This is killing me." You see, it was a great job with wonderful people in a company I respected, but there was a piece of me that was not being expressed, that my whole self was not showing up for the job, that it was time for a change. And I felt at that point that when I wrote "This is killing me," it was clear that this was what I would call an inflection point. A time in our life where we know our paths have two very different directions. I can go this way or I can go that way. I can stay here in this work or I can do something different. Now, I tell you this story from 20 some odd years ago, not because that story is anything special, but actually because it's anything but special. because you see, we all have these inflection points, these times in our life when who we were is no longer who we want to be. And that happens as part of the natural human experience. And so I invited you when we first started the meditation to ask, what's uncertain for you now? What's changing? I mean, for all of us, it's this COVID situation, but I'll lay it on top of that, maybe a lot of other things that are in transition for you. Even in the course of normal everyday life, we have come up against really major inflection points in our life in the form of retirement, in the form of an unexpected illness for ourselves or our loved ones, a time where our children are having difficulty. So I would ask you, as you thought about where you are right now in life, what transition are you navigating? What uncertainty is present for you? And just go ahead and type that in so we can all see that whether it's COVID or divorce or illness, that this is part of being human. I'm going to take a moment and just ask you to type that in. So there are a couple of people typing in about the job. A lot of uncertainty now in jobs and how do we protect our jobs and what's happening in certain industries, or retirement, or definitely an empty nest. Yeah, nervous about leaving the program and what's next for you. Yeah, you're in the certificate, so it comes after that. So much, next step. Anxiety, a move, far from friends and family. A husband with Alzheimer's. My mother fell. And sometimes, as Cheryl said, more than one thing, right? Forced retirement, a breakup, layered on COVID, what isn't in transition right now. And fear of contracting COVID. Needing to reinvent myself. Yeah. So I just want to, first of all, have you take a deep breath in. Take a big exhale. As you hold the realization that this is part of the human experience, that we can hold each other and support each other and be together in community, knowing that each of us are facing transition. I remember one time I was at Kripalu and there was 200 people in the audience, and there was a conversation about transitions, about someone would raise their hand and say, well, this is going on, and someone else raised their hand and said, well, this is going on. And then finally someone raised their hand and said, well, I wonder if we could just raise, if anybody who is not in transition, please raise your hand. I bet you can guess what happened. No one's hand went up. So this is part of the human experience. And over the course of the next 3 days, what I hope you'll get is some specific ways of looking at these transitions in a way that's helpful and supportive. And number one being that it is just a human experience. First, normalizing that there's nothing you're doing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, you're part of a community of people that are in transition alongside you. Yes, and Julie, this is a powerful list, right? We can see that through everyone else's experience. Part of this experiencing of transition is recognizing sort of the felt sense that comes along with transitions. So if I think back 20 years ago to when I was experiencing the idea that this job is not it, there's something else missing, I recognized that there was a place of me looking at my work as a creative outlet. When I first started in healthcare, when I first started in nuclear medicine, there was a sense of vibrancy, a sense of excitement waking up, a sense of going forth and learning and doing. And I realized as I was waking up and going into work at that point that the zest for the work had kind of dulled, that there was sort of a dryness to it, a desiccation. I felt exhausted, unmotivated. I felt sad too, because oh my God, I went through a lot of schooling for this. What do you mean this isn't satisfying me? That the mental model I had for success in my mind, somehow when I reached it, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So there was sadness that I noticed. There was also, I noticed a bit of excitement. If this isn't it, I wonder what the next thing is. Like, what could that be? So if you look at the experience that you're having right now with the transition that you're living through, I would ask you that question. What is the felt sense? What is the embodied experience for you of this transition? What are you noticing? What emotions would you use? What words would you use to describe where you're at now? And again, as we share what we're feeling, we begin to see as a community a universality or a humanness to all these emotions that we feel. And so people have started to type in. I would ask you to look inside yourself and say, what's present here with this transition right now? So some anxiety, people are typing in self-doubt. Yeah, a sense of loss. Like, I'm feeling something is missing. Scattered, distracted, sadness, fear, overwhelmed, uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty, numbness. Yeah. Can I do it? Yeah, I'm not sure I can do this. What's this? A loss. So can you see as you read through this list, the common human experiences we have when we're in these places of transition? So along with some of the loss, some people also mentioned some hope, excitement, loneliness and sadness, unfairness, why me? Yeah. So we're holding a lot of heaviness around these transitions. Even if there's anxiety, even if there's a sense of excitement about what could possibly be next, or an unknown, or curiosity about the unknown, we're also holding this opposite of heavy fear and sadness and anxiety, and this is unfair and why me? So holding the whole of what's happening now in times of these transition is actually the first step. So we're not denying that, one, we're into transition, and two, it's really, there's pieces of it that just feel yucky. And I'm sure I can think of a stronger word than yucky. But there are a lot of strong emotions that go along with this. So what I wanted to paint today is sort of a mindset or a vision of this uncertain time. Yes, and I'm going to move over to my slides right now. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see this? Thank you. So I just talked through a whole bunch of the beginning. I'm not going to continue on. This is where I want to be. This jump into a chasm is many times how it feels when we enter times of great transition. Some people call them life quakes, those times where the ground beneath us shakes and who we knew ourselves to be changed. And that who we were is no longer. we're no longer a healthy person, or we're no longer a married person, or we're no longer a business executive. But who we are to become has not yet happened, right? We're not yet that person after a divorce, or what happens to us after we die. So we're in this stage of no longer and not yet. This, my friends, is a place that can bring up all the basic human instincts, all the basic fear, anxiety, and overwhelm, because what we want as humans, first and foremost, is safety, is a sense of groundedness. I can do this. A sense of, this is where I'm at. This is how I know what to do. And this place of no longer and not yet is not one of those places that feels particularly good. And when you think about COVID, Carolyn and I were talking right before we got started here that I was kind of hoping, I was under the incorrect assumption with COVID that, when you have the vaccine, there'd be a clean, everybody would get vaccinated, and then boom, we'd move on. That instead, what we have is, well, we're no longer in a crisis that we were a year ago, but we're not yet in a place of safety. So there's still this navigation of uncertainty, of unknown that doesn't feel particularly safe. This is different than having a problem in your life that you want to problem solve towards, right? That lends itself to, if I do this, then that will happen. The uncertainty by its very nature doesn't lend itself to that type of linear approach. It's much messier. This is what the anthropologist Victor Turner calls liminal space. And liminal space is that time of no longer, not yet. That's actually where the phrase came from. He coined that term to describe the rites of passage that Indigenous people went through to go from girl to womanhood or from boy to manhood. It's a specific rite of passage where who you knew yourself to be as a young boy, for example, need to go down into the depths of purgatory or challenge or some difficulties in order to come out the other side in a different way. This no longer and not yet is also what's being pointed to in the mythologist Joseph Campbell's work when he outlines the hero's journey. And actually, I think one of the certificate in positive psychology alumni, Sergio, last week did a wonderful presentation about the hero's journey, that it is like a rite of passage, and that is a little bit more maneuvering. There's difficulties to overcome, there's challenges, there's self-doubt, there's uncertainty, and there's a promise of what could be next, what could be coming around the corner. So this is also this time that's like a hero's journey. And it's also, if I could create another analogy, it's also what the adult learner Jack Mesereau called disorienting dilemmas. Those times in our life where we actually become disoriented to who we are because who we knew ourselves to be has been so changed by this dilemma that we're under. And what he found in his work in adult learning is that these times of liminal space, of the hero's journey, of the disorienting dilemma, actually becomes a ripe moment for transformational learning. There are these moments where we question who we are, when we question what's important to us, when we actually live into that with each breath, that becomes a transformative space. As uncertain, as difficult, as challenging it can be, it also holds within it the invitation to transform oneself, no matter the difficulty that we're under. And so how do we navigate it, right? I mean, we could learn all we want to about the hero's journey, about the disorienting dilemma, the liminal space, but really the question comes down to, how the heck do I navigate this? And in many ways, we can feel like the blind leading the blind, right? Because people you go to find help with don't really know how to help you. They don't know how to answer your questions. They can't help you in this hero's journey the way that you would like to be helped. And I'll tell you, 20 years ago, when I went through this disorienting dilemma for myself, I failed and flailed for a very long time. I think initially when I look back, I failed because I was going everywhere to say, okay, if this isn't it, where should I turn to? And where do you go when you have questions? I went to Dr. Google. Everyone, I Google, what job should I go into? What brings career satisfaction? Well, what are my skills? What are my strengths? I mean, I remember buying programs about how to write your memoirs. Why the hell do I care about writing my memoir? It's just, I was searching. So I failed at finding a way to navigate that transition in a timely manner. I'll tell you about, it took me 20 years, what I'm going to give you in the next 3 days between Maria and I. I had this fear at the time that I would be stuck in this place forever, that I would be unable to navigate myself into either a new place, a new work, a new outlook, a new way of being. And you get that sense now with this level of uncertainty that you feel that, oh my gosh, I'll never get out of this place of fear and anxiety. So there's a fear there that I wouldn't be able to change, that I'd be wasting these precious moments right here, even if it's in liminal space. And what I wanted to do was lift towards better. I want to build hope, as we all do, because ultimately what we all want with every precious moment of our lives is to lead that life in the best way possible. And it really doesn't matter if you have 30 years of life left, 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 weeks. This life, this breath, this moment is what we want to live into as best as possible. Does that make sense? So this liminal space, we don't want to wait until it's over to live fully and completely, right? We want, even with the fear, we want to live it completely. That's what we hope for. So again, what I'm going to give you next is 20 years distilled into 20 minutes. Because my hope is that we can shorten this learning curve together. And I'm tempted to ask you another question, and the reason I'm quiet is because I'm also cognizant of the time, but I would have you think about this. How are you navigating right now? What's working well for you? Because you might even think, okay, I'm going to get this pattern of behavior on how to navigate this, but there may be things you're doing right now that are actually helping you navigate. I'm going to ask you anyways. Go ahead and type in some of the things that you're doing now that's helping you navigate this uncertainty. There are things you're doing now that support you. What is that? Yoga. Doing one thing at a time, doing your dancing. These webinars. Yeah. Meditation and breath work. Praying, hiking. Self-care. The beautiful weather, walking. Yeah, and some people are being honest, I'm not doing anything because I'm too scared. And I would just simply say, I'm doing nothing because I'm too scared. I would question that, because here you are now in this webinar and you typed in that response. You did something, right? So the idea I'm doing nothing, you just typed in you're doing something. And sometimes those steps are as small as that. And that's good. That, yes, like attending this webinar is a step. Yes, and of course, sip. So we can see all of these things that we're doing to help us to navigate this. I just need to move this chat so I can see what's next. So what I want to do first is lay out to you the mindset that I think about this liminal space is, even though it feels horrible. And that this is a sacred time. The no longer and not yet is a sacred time. It's not something to just throw away or to be scared of, to be, oh, well, you know, I'm waiting for the next step, or I don't want the next step to come. It's actually this moment, this time, that's the sacred time. And so I put this woman up with a red cape, because many times these are these sort of common things in our life, like wearing our jeans, doing our housework. We're also putting on the red cape of the superpower of this sacred time, even in our difficulty. The other reason I put this particular picture up is because these balloons are something I teach about in the very beginning of the certificate in whole being positive psychology. And that is about the idea that we have within us in this very moment many possible selves over the course of the next 3 days, 3 months, 30 years, the rest of our lives. We have many possible selves. And we get to choose which version of the possible self we would like to live into. This is something we work on a whole 30 days in the certificate program on our possible selves. And it's a thread that we carry through for the whole 9 months. And tomorrow, when you speak with Maria, and she'll be teaching you about the narrative of that possible self, she will help you through your writing prompts, how to think about those possible selves and future selves, and even past selves with a broader context. The other thing is that sometimes the timeline for this liminal space is different than we expected. So for some of us, myself included, that timeline was 20 years. I swear, if you had asked me 20 years ago how long it would take me to shift, I would have said 2 months. I certainly would not have said 20 years. And for some of us who have a terminal illness, who are really sick, the timeline, you know, we're always fighting that fear in our minds. How long do I have? And so whatever that uncertainty, this timeline comes back to, both a realization that we don't know what we don't know. And time can either expand or contract given our choices on how we choose to spend it in any given day. So these 20 years, although they've been longer than expected, I can say they've been wonderful. I've loved living into where I've been now. I never could have constructed this possible self in the future 20 years ago, but I could live into it by the choices that I make every day. So I want to give to you some, and I show it in stairs, but it's not really it's not a straight line. So I'm going to give you these steps as a guideline, knowing that the actual lived experience is much messier than I'm going to lay out. And it's messier because what we're doing is we're learning, not performing. So we're not actually saying for this time in this liminal space, in this hero's journey, I'm not going to go perform. I'm not going to be the best of this, whatever it is that we're in the middle of doing. Instead, we're going to look at it as a learning, not a performing time. And I'm waiting because I feel like I have to sneeze. I guess not. Okay. So God bless me, even though I didn't sneeze. So here are the steps. First of all, taking it in. I'm going to get my notes because I want to make sure I hit every point that I wanted to here. And I say take it in as a first step because many times what we try and do is move on. And this is why I started this session with, how are you feeling? What are you actually going through? Taking it in means recognizing what's happening now in this time of transition. And it's also taking in the good of what could be or what's happening now, the support you're getting, the people around you, these webinars, the sun shining. So when you take it in, this is actually allowing yourself to conduct research in this very moment about what you're able to take in, because many times taking it in is hard to do. In some respects, this taking in the experience means meeting your fear. It means meeting your anxiety. That's not easy. So the taking it in of what else is possible might, and I'll talk more about this on Thursday, we might stop there because we just want to curl up in a ball and not manage it, or drink, or watch endless videos. So this first step about the research of taking it in is actually opening yourself up to the feelings that you're feeling, the situation that you're in, and the good. And then specifically, we can spend more of our time and attention consciously redirecting the brain away from the fear and anxiety that can at times feel overwhelming, and instead asking ourselves the question, who's done this well? Who can I learn from? What resources are out there? Who is most supportive? When do I feel a sliver of hope? So we begin looking at the growing tip in people, in studies, in the research, in these webinars, in connecting with friends, in a way that we can begin to take in not just the fear and anxiety, but also take in the hope, the resources, the relationships that can serve us through this time. The second step says not only can we take in this information, but we actually have to test it out for ourselves. This is the idea of me search, because anytime there's scientific articles on what works in overcoming anxiety or depression or heading towards flourishing, any research article will be a bell curve of what works for most people. Well, I got to tell you, even though we're all humans, we're all unique. And what works for Sue might not work for Betty. What works for Bob might not work for Joe. So we have to test things out. Can we take this step of taking in information and then testing it out and actually trying it on for size? And this means that you're asking yourself some very important questions. What's true for me? What values am I holding dear in this moment that I want to live into? What aspirations do I have for myself for this time? In psychology speak, this is called behavioral activation, that we cannot think our way into happiness. And I love how Maria Sarwar speaks of this. What she says is that gratitude as a concept is interesting, but gratitude as a felt sense is a game changer for our daily experience of life. So the behavioral activation means that you're actually moving yourself today in a way that supports this quest of happiness, of well-being, of connection. So you're not thinking to yourself, what do I need to do to make me happy? Let me be great. You're actually doing things that cultivate that. So you can think about these things, but then the action comes. Let me activate it through my behavior. And this is the me search. If you are going to take information in and open yourself to your experience, if you are going to test out new things and you find something that works for you in a given moment, it behooves you to do it again. If today the sun felt really good and lifted your spirits, well, you could make a habit of being outside for 30 seconds or a minute every day, or standing in front of a window, or sitting in front of a window. So this is when we start to build habits. We start to reconfigure how we're living each day by making choices that create a new story about this new self that's being birthed even as you live into this moment. These are new thinking, new ways of habits of thinking, of behavior. And this is, in psychological speak, adaptive coping, because we certainly know we have a lot of maladaptive coping, eating junk food, drinking too much, getting angry, lashing out. So along with the maladaptive behaviors, we can begin to cultivate the adaptive coping skills for the habits that will help us live better today. And again, it doesn't matter if we have 1 day left in our life, or 100 days, or 10 years, or 20 years. This time, this moment, this habit is the one we're cultivating now. When we take the next step, we take it in, we test it out, we see what works, and then we live it throughout. And this is the learning pedagogy that we use at Whole Being Institute. And by pedagogy, really fancy words to just say, how do we teach this stuff? There's a whole bunch to learn. Then we try it out and see what works, and then we live it throughout. We really want to embody and live into that, which helps us live this life with a little less fear and a lot more flourishing, right? Because it's not all just flourishing. There's also fear that's present at times. Take it in, test it out, see what works, and live it throughout. So I want to stop the share right now and just ask you, what is the one thing that's resonating for you today? Because right now you've just taken in a whole bunch of stuff. What is it that resonates for you? Let's share. I've been talking to the screen, and I'd love to see some of your thoughts about what sticks for you, what most resonates, what's most helpful.
You know, Megan, I was thinking of how I was just struck by how many of us are going through this transition, right? And that tendency to think that my experience is unique. I think that's a very human thing to do, but, because of the particulars of it. And listening to and reading that profound list in the chat of what everybody is going through really gave me a sense of an embodied sense of, wow, I think I knew that intellectually, but an embodied sense of that. So that's one of the things that's striking me. And then we have some folks in the chat responding as well.
Yeah, so some people are saying, if it's helpful, do it again. Yes. The idea of no longer and not yet. Yeah, the idea of reaching out to someone who's done this before, connecting with values, not waiting, but living in this moment. Different versions. What's in the highest good? The me research. Liminal space is sacred time. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The disorienting dilemma, yes. I love that term when I came across it, Sheila. Thank you for that. Knowing, yes, and Patrice, that's true. Knowing what works one day may not the next, which is why on Thursday we'll talk about a way of thinking about that, differences from day to day. There's also an intellectual challenge. Yeah, Max, thank you for that. Accepting uncertainty, testing things out, and then making what works into habits. Thank you, Rachel. Irene, learning, sharing, giving of myself. The Thursday program, Joy, that was supposed to be Heniki. We're doing a series, so this is just day 1 of 3. I'm teaching today. Maria is teaching tomorrow, and then I'll circle back on Thursday to sort of close the loop. So this is day 1 of 3 about this hero's journey. Great. All right, so for the last 5 minutes, I'm just going to go ahead and close out with one other point that we started here, this idea of the no longer and the not yet of the liminal space. And what I want to really leave you with as a touch point today is that even though we're in the trapeze between no longer and not yet, you know, the time when you let go of the old and you haven't yet grabbed on to the next trapeze, that you're sort of hanging there in this no longer and not yet. That even so, no longer, not yet, you are here now. And in this space of here now, you can take the next step, even if that next step means an inhale and an exhale. Even if that next step is being here on this webinar. Even if that next step is ... You've already taken the next step. We're already here now. And since we're already here now, I just want to say what an incredible gift and blessing it is to be here with you, to be able to share this, something I feel very passionate about, in case you haven't noticed. I feel very passionate about this. And I want you to know you're not alone. It's completely human, that you're loved, and that we want the best for you. And that's why Caroline and I and Phoebe and the whole group of us continue to show up week after week. You're loved. Thank you for having me. I'm going to turn it over to Caroline. We have time for questions or any other final points.
Thank you so much, Megan. This is one of the reasons we came together the week after we closed. The JCC closed in March 2020 was I knew that there was science on resilience, and I knew there were techniques, and I knew there was science that would help us not only survive this, but thrive it. None of us knew at that time that it would go on for this long. And as you so beautifully expressed, that it would be so up and down. I like you, expected it to kind of end and then go back to normal. Did anybody else expect that? Or hope for that? Yeah. And it just isn't like that. It's very, very chaotic and very, yes, masks, no masks. And so this today was very helpful. And the other thing that has been really helpful for me, and I really want to encourage everyone to consider this, is that I took the SIP program with a certificate in positive psychology during the first 9 months of COVID. And it was one of the most profound things that I have ever done in terms of my own resilience. I learned about the science. And I also learned that I was in community. Of course, I love community. I'm at the JCC, which I always say means join a caring community. So I wanted to just strongly encourage everyone to consider that. Megan, if you could tell us a little bit about that. I believe you have another cohort starting is it in August or September? Or?
Yeah, Module 1 starts August 30th. Yeah. And then we go into November for Module 2, and then we do the immersion. So when we talk about this arc of uncertainty and the timeline for this, what is so luxurious about the certificate program is that it goes over a long period of time. So it allows you not to answer a question, but to live into the question. And that's what I so love about it. So it starts in the fall, goes right through till next year. And what it asks you to do is go dive deeper into the question of who am I? What do I value? What relationships support that? Who else is in community with me? How do I lift myself? How do I realize goals and reach my dreams? And then how do I lead myself? So that's really the whole of the program. And I see that Caroline put the link there. And I also just want to, as we talk about the program and talk about the steps, is there anything you need here and now in the next 5 minutes? Is there a question you would like to ask me? Is there something you would like clarification on, or a comment that you would like to make? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and let's open that up to, that's not just for me, that's for the whole community. If you, Megan, are you open to people unmuting, or?
Yes, I would love to.
Here we go. Beth says, how do I forgive myself? This is a great one for making a bad decision.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, don't we all just want to go, oh, we know what that feels like, the sense of regret and the sense of I want to go back. First of all, raise your hand if you've made a mistake before. Raise your hand if you know how crappy that feels to know you made a mistake and not have it. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I got a text from someone who made a mistake. They had forgotten something that they'd committed to. And I didn't think I looked at it and said, that's too bad. And then we readjusted and did something different. But that person felt so badly. They must have apologized to me no less than 10 times. And I said, you'll start feeling bad when you forgive yourself. Because there's nothing for me to forgive. It's really that self-forgiveness. And that's not always easy to do, because we can give others permission a lot easier than we can give ourselves permission for making a mistake, right? So how would you forgive someone else? If this was someone else making this mistake, a loved one, a son or a daughter, a beloved, would you be able to forgive this mistake? If so, aren't you as deserving of that forgiveness as the other? Yeah. And the other thing, I wrote a short book once on regret, because there was a decision I had made personally that I regretted, that I just made me feel sick. And every time I thought about it, I felt sick. So if you use these steps that we just talked about, I first said, take it in. You can take in the fact that it doesn't feel good to regret or to make a mistake. And then I realized that when I did the research, not research out there, but in real life, seeing how other people dealt with it, I saw that someone else had made a similar mistake and had reshaped it into an opportunity. So I took it in, I tested it out, and then I realized that there was another way in which I could look at it, either reframing it or actually looking at it as a new opportunity. So I hope either one of those two things were helpful. Forgive yourself like you would forgive a beloved, or forgive yourself by reshaping it into something else.
Do you ever, Megan, put like a little time limit on it? Say, listen, I'm going to let myself feel bad for this long, and then I'm gonna, do you know what I mean? Like,
I love that idea. Yes, I do that with worry sometimes. Worry, I will give myself time for, and then I'd say, okay, enough worrying. Sometimes I'll go to bed worrying about my children. And I say, tonight I'm not going to worry. I'm going to give myself the night off from worry.
Right. Or even scheduling a little time. Okay, I'm going to have a little cup of tea. And if there's anything to worry about, this is the time I'm going to do it. And then, I'm done. But I always was struck by, permission to be human too, right? We said, somebody wrote that in the chat. I think that was Ellen.
Yes, thank you for that one. So, it's funny when Tal teaches the permission to be human, it really resonates. It's this big umbrella thought that we all have these human tendencies. We all make mistakes. We all don't live up to our expectations, and we can give ourselves permission to be human. And I just wrote a blog about this, or I did a Facebook Live about the fact that each of us have to give ourselves permission for something. Maybe it's permission to be human, but maybe in your case, it's permission to forgive yourself. Like sometimes we hold forgiveness because we want to keep beating ourselves up. So can we give ourselves permission to forgive ourselves, or permission to experiment, or permission to rest? What is it you need to give yourself permission for, that you're holding yourself to, that you don't need to any longer? Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone that has?
Yeah. Yes, trying not to make a bad decision, guaranteed at some point we'll probably make a bad decision, because part of being human is we don't have a time machine where we can travel into the future and try on these different decisions for size. We don't have a crystal ball. So it is by its very nature uncertain and unknown. And in that, yeah.
We've had several questions, and I know that we'll be talking about this tomorrow and also Thursday, about paralyzed by anxiety and not to make a bad decision in advance, because trying to make life big job decisions. So that idea of thoughts about paralyzed by anxiety decision making. So.
Right. Well, two things which I talked about today was actually taking inventory when you're feeling like that of the resources around you. Because with the anxiety can be so limiting in how we view the world, we can imagine ourselves getting a toolbox and filling it up with resources around us, our relationships, nature. We'll talk more about this on Thursday with Spire, but all of those things that we can put into the toolbox at this time. And then the second step is actually taking those tools and using them and actually engaging with sort of mini wins throughout the day, so that you have something to point to behavioral wise, which lifts you slightly, even 1%. From that anxiety prison. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm putting some programs in the chat because we have some things that we're working on this August, in addition to what we're doing here, this series throughout the month. I mean, we've got some really amazing programs. Tonight, we have a digital vision board class.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's really, really accessible. Robin makes that so accessible and so fun. And you can do it on your phone. You learn how to use your phone or your computer and make digital vision boards. I know I'm very visual, so sometimes that helps me. Like, what do I want? And what do I see that? So I strongly encourage you to think about that. And what time is tomorrow's class? It is at noon. We'll be here with Maria Serwa. And then, of course, we're looking at beating burnout with Dr. Jill Barron, who wrote a book on stress, and reducing fear and anxiety with hypnosis. That is another mental thing. And then finally, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I'm paralyzed, my eating is not the best, as Megan was mentioning. So I call him Dr. H, Dr. Human, is going to be talking to us about sugar, fat, and salt, and how we can sometimes get into that trap. So please think of the JCC and Whole Being Institute as your resource. Reach out to our organizations. We're here for you, and keep coming back, right? I'm going to unmute you all, or let you unmute. I'm going to take off the spotlight so you can thank Megan, who will be back on Thursday. It's just an amazing time to spend with you, Megan. I thank you so much. Your generosity, your leadership, your compassion, and just even the pace of your voice just calms me down. Anybody else?
Well, thank you for having me. Absolute
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you so
everybody.
much. You really hit home for me. Thank you.
Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Caroline.
You're welcome, you all.
Thank you.
And I love to say, we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Will the recording be available?
Yes, the recording, if you signed up for the class, you will get the recordings, all 3 of them, at the end of the week on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye now.